Oh. Well, thank you, Mary. It's a bit overwhelming. I'd better give a good one tonight, eh? I'm a bit tired. I've been on the road for about 6 weeks, Germany and all over this country. And I have to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say, but I never know, so it's always extemporaneous. People are hungry for information now, absolutely hungry. And I think it's one of two things, that the nuclear age is going on, but I think it's Fukushima. And I think people got a hell of a shock. I did. 2 days after it happened, suddenly I got this dreadful feeling in the pit of my stomach that nothing could be done about it. Like it's descending into Hades, like a Greek myth and legend. Who was the dog with the eyes the size of dinner plates who guarded Hades? Cerberus. And Dad used to read me those Greek myths and legends, and it felt like that there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it. And there still is not. And this blasted accident is ongoing and will never end. And I heard 2 people behind me just now as I was sitting there talking about building number 4. I don't know if you want me to go through all the dynamics of what actually occurred at Fukushima in a simple way. Hands up those who would like that. Okay, well, you know there was an earthquake. Number 1. Number 2, during the earthquake, the external power supply was destroyed. Number 3, that the reactors, in fact, were damaged during the earthquake. Number 4, the ground, I think, fell about a metre. Oh, you don't use meters, do you? All the rest of the world does, but you do still use feet. About 3 feet. And then in came the tsunami. Well, when you lose the power supply, because the reactors, each of them, need 1 million gallons of cooling water a minute to keep them cool because they're so incredibly hot, releasing the energy of E equals mc squared, a la Einstein, they have big diesel generators underneath the reactors, about half the size of this church. Huge things. Well, in came the tsunami and drowned the diesel generators. And they were rushing around getting batteries from their cars to try and keep the pumps working. Well, of course it didn't work. Within 24 to 48 hours, 3 reactors melted down. In each reactor, unit 1, 2 and 3, was 100 tons of tremendously hot uranium and fission products. So hot that if you lose the cooling mechanism, the whole thing melts into a molten larval radioactive mass, and it's called corium, C-O-R-I-U-M. And it melts its way through about 6 inches of steel of the reactor vessel, and it melted down onto the containment floor. Now, as that happens, the fuel rods are made of zirconium, which at about 1500 degrees centigrade, I think, reacts with water to produce hydrogen. Well, we all know about hydrogen because of the Hindenburg. Remember the Hindenburg? They had this huge thing and it burnt and all those people were killed with everyone watching it. Well, there were 4 hydrogen explosions, and you've seen the reactors. The damage, I mean, they were devastated. They look a bit like Chernobyl. The Japanese government and the NRC knew that there were meltdowns within 48 hours in 3 reactors, but they didn't tell the Japanese people for 3 months. 3 months. The cover-up here is absolutely obscene. It's worse than Chernobyl, and Chernobyl was pretty bad, but the Japanese are really good at it. The Japanese are a feudalistic system where everyone obeys everyone else and they're very polite and they all apologise, but it's very stratified. And the whole government is really run by TEPCO, which is a Tokyo Electric Power Company, and they've put reactors in little fishing villages which were very poor, but then they pay for the schools, the roads, you know, a nice hall, all sorts of things. And so the fishermen, etc., become enamoured with nuclear power. That's what happens, and that's what happens here. The nuclear power companies come in and they make the streets, they pay for the schools and all sorts of things. So it's all nuclear bribery. And so TEPCO really runs the government. Essentially, it's incredibly powerful. It's like Duke Power and Southern Georgia. Is it Southern Georgia Power Company? What is it? What is it? Who's building the reactors in Georgia? What?
Southern.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you give them such power, and it's time that you took it away from them, because they have no right to have such power. Anyway, the Japanese government had a series of radiation detectors called SPEEDIE, S-P-E-E-D-I-E, that detect radiation, and particularly after a nuclear war and stuff, it's to detect it. And they knew where the radiation was going, but they didn't tell the people because they didn't want to create panic. So the people fled right into the path of the highest levels of radiation. Now this is for a physician absolutely unbelievable. I mean, these people should be put in jail, at the very least. Because what happened was families fled, and children, as we know, are 10 to 20 times more radiosensitive than adults, and little girls are twice as sensitive as little boys to radiation and getting cancer, and we don't know why. Fetuses are thousands of times more so. Pregnant women fled. 1x rate of the pregnant abdomen doubles the incidence of leukemia in that child. So sensitive are they. Now, the Japanese people were kind of lucky, because when the accident occurred, the wind was blowing from west to east towards you. So the radiation, the major amount of it, which was released, massive amounts, blew across the Pacific. And the radiation levels in Seattle went up 40,000 times above ambient levels during that time, March, April, 40,000 times. So the people were inhaling hot particles, probably bits of plutonium and all sorts of things, into their lungs. And the radiation, they measured in the seaweed off Anaheim, which is where Disneyland is, the radioactive iodine, which didn't come by the sea but came by fallout and landed in the kelp, was really high. It's all decayed away to nothing now. And fallout occurred all across the country, in Oklahoma and in Boston and all over the country. Well, you know, people say it wasn't very much fallout. I'll get into that in a minute, how it can affect your body. But suffice it to say, then the wind changed, and it blew towards the northwest of Japan, and it also blew all over Japan. Now, there's a man called Arnie Gunderson, who's a wonderful nuclear engineer, who I have on my radio show quite often. He worked for the nuclear industry. He used to think I was a nut, he told me. And then he realised later on, when he found the nuclear industry was lying, and he became a whistleblower, that I actually wasn't a nut, and he started to understand what his wife was saying, that what I was saying was the truth. And now he and I work together, and he's a wonderful man who can explain things so simply about nuclear engineering and the containment vessels and all sorts of things. So I often have him on my radio show called If You Love This Planet, which you must get played here in Asheville if it's not played. It plays on Pacifica once a week. And I interview wonderful people like Arnie, but James Hansen, who's the godfather of global warming, and all sorts of, you know, the world expert in permafrost melting, a man called Romanov, who's a Russian who lives in Alaska. Just let me diverge a little bit. Permafrost melting is starting to melt. Within the permafrost, and if you go to Alaska, you'll see the trees all at funny angles and the lampposts all because the permafrost is melting. And as it melts, there are millions or billions of tons of CO2 in that permafrost that's been trapped forever. Plus millions or billions of tons of methane, which is about 20,000 times more potent as a global warmer than CO2. That's called a tipping point. And as that material is released to the atmosphere, as it's starting to be now, and it's bubbling up through the oceans and the ponds and the like, we've had it. And I see no evidence in this country, and I have to say I'm extremely angry about this, that anyone's doing a thing about it. Everyone's driving their kids to ballet in tanks, doing 5 miles to the gallon. Every SUV should be Banned, mandated by law to be banned. How dare people drive around in SUVs doing 5 miles to the gallon? What are we doing? You mustn't have a sense of entitlement. We can't do it anymore. Now, going back to Japan, I was diverging a bit. Japan has 1 reactor operating out of 54, and that might be closed down soon. Guess what? They're not dying. Well, they'll be dying of other things, which I'll get to in a minute. But not of lack of electricity. Oh, well, in the summer, it's pretty hot, so they have to sweat. Now, we develop sweat glands because when it's hot, we sweat, and when the sweat dries, you lose heat, called the latent heat of vaporization. That's why we have sweat glands. Okay? So it doesn't hurt to sweat in the summer. I know it's pretty hot here and I know it's humid, but people lived here before there was electricity, and you can actually power your air conditioners with solar power. You have a lot of sun here. Why isn't every single house in America covered with a solar panel, with solar panels? Why? 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 Why is this country spending $1 trillion on weapons a year? Death. Why? Why do you not have a free medical care system? The only country in the world without a free medical care system. I go to the doctor at home, I can get treated, I pay, I go next door to the government office and they give me the cash in hand. My tax dollars going to my medical care. That's called civilization. It's also called socialism. Oh, what a naughty word. Oh. But you have socialized nuclear power, socialized nuclear weapons, socialized killing in the Pentagon, so you are actually a socialized country. Someone's going, maybe they don't like me saying socialism. Don't anyone else leave, even if I offend you, because it's important. Well, Jesus was a socialist, wasn't he? Leave your worldly goods and follow me. Huh? Not that I actually am a Christian. I'm a pantheist. I believe in nature. No, I don't believe. I worship nature. And Pan was the god of nature. You know, he played the pipes, dear little thing. So, how did I get onto that? I've lost my train of thought. Where was I heading? What? Japan, yeah. Back to Japan. So, Arnie Gunderson thinks that about 50% of Japan is contaminated now. I just feel so incredibly sorry for the Japanese, you know. They had the 2 nuclear weapons and the Hibakusha and all they've been through. And the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission set up by this country, yeah, they studied all those survivors, but they did never treat them. They had no health insurance and they were never treated by this country, although this country damaged them. And we have learnt our standards of radiation exposure from the Hibakusha. Leukemia peaked 5 years after the bombs dropped, and solid cancer started appearing 15 years later, and even now, so many years later, new cancers are appearing. So each cancer has a different incubation period. We're now seeing multiple myelomas, carcinomas of the genitorenal tract, etc. So it's very interesting, and that's how we've learnt radiation standards. But now why did they build nuclear power in Japan? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the Japanese were very allergic to anything nuclear after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the Americans, in their wisdom, decided that they would introduce peaceful nuclear power into Japan so they'd get over their allergy. And they've written about it. And they did. But Japan is an incredibly volatile geological island, and of course prone to earthquakes. So they've built these nuclear power plants all on earthquake zones. You have 2 in California, Diablo Canyon and San Onofre. So there was an earthquake, predictable, and there could be more. So here we have 3 reactor buildings which have had explosions. Those 3, Unit 1, 2 and 3, are filling up with hydrogen as I speak, and it's becoming once again very concentrated. And because they're scared stiff of another hydrogen explosion, in one of those reactor buildings. They're pumping excessive nitrogen into the building to dilute the hydrogen so it won't explode. But the other day, the nitrogen pump stopped and it didn't work. Okay, we're dealing with fallible human beings, fallible equipment, with infallible technology. Now, Unit 4, on the roof of the reactor building, is a cooling pool, a spent fuel pool, with over 1,500 extremely hot, extremely radioactive spent fuel rods, because they just unloaded the whole of the reactor's inventory into that pool just before the earthquake happened. In each reactor all around your country, 1,000 megawatt reactor, is as much radiation as that released by 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. So when you looked at that map, you're right in the middle of it, of lots of Hiroshima bombs, lots of them. And that stuff can get out, and if it gets out, woe betide. It's a wicked, evil, carcinogenic, killing industry. And we worried about tobacco. And how long did it take us to convince people that smoking causes cancer? I knew it in first year medical school in 1956. But the tobacco companies used a very good propaganda technique, which is doubt. We're not sure if smoking causes cancer, and it took us years and years and years and years to convince people that smoking causes cancer, emphysema, peripheral, where people have to have their limbs amputated and the like, because they get gangrene from smoking. But this is different, because smoking only kills the smoker. Yes, passive smoking, we know about that. But nuclear power goes on forever. The radioactive waste that Mary Olson talked about will impact generations for the next 1,000,000 years, because the EPA says it must be isolated from the environment for 1,000,000 years. So we're going to impact people with disease, and I'll get out to that in a minute for the rest of the time. This is a truly evil industry, and it's an offshoot of the weapons industry. And the weapons industry wrote about it, the DOD, in 1952. There was a psychologist working with the weapons industry, and he said we need to introduce the peaceful atom, so people will more readily accept nuclear weapons. How's that for evil thinking? I mean, I can't think of any other word but evil as a physician. Thou shalt not kill. How long does it take us to try and cure a cancer patient? How many patients have I sat beside as the metastases spread throughout their body, as they become incontinent of urine and feces, as they lose their mental capacities, as they're in the most dreadful pain? It's the most hideous way to die. 1 in 3 will get cancer. And we live in a chemical cocktail of 80,000 chemicals every day, very few of which are tested for carcinogenicity. 5 they test a year in the EPA, 5. And it's up to us to prove they're dangerous and cause cancer, not for the chemical industries to prove they're safe. God help us, what's going on? Who are these companies? And why are they adding all this rhubarb, we call it, all these chemicals to everything we use in the house, and flame retardants on the furniture, and little children's pajamas, and you've got to ban plastic bottles here. Plastic bottles contain BPA, which is a hormone mimicker, stimulates breast cancer, prostate cancer, causes early menarche in little girls. Who thought of selling water in plastic bottles? And the plastic lasts forever. And there's an island in the Pacific, twice as large as Texas, made of plastic, and the fish feed it to their babies and get intestinal obstruction. The albatrosses feed it to their little chicks, they die. It's getting bigger. So we have to ban plastic, but I'm deviating. So we live in a chemical cocktail, and those chemicals are synergistic with radioactive elements. In other words, if you're exposed to some strontium-90 plus a carcinogenic chemical, it's not 1 and 1 equals 2 in cancer induction. It might be 1 and 1 equals 10 in cancer induction. That's called synergy. Okay, is that Kitty? Hello, Kitty. So, to get back to Japan again, They're in great danger. There are children living in zones in Japan now which were evacuation zones in Chernobyl. People have been evacuated. Children are so radiosensitive. In Itate, which got a lot of fallout in the northwest, they've looked at over 3,000 children, over 1,000 of whom have thyroid nodules. Now, children don't get thyroid nodules. I've never seen one in my practice of paediatrics. And the government said they will follow them. Now, for those physicians in the audience, you know that that's not what you do in medicine. If someone has a thyroid nodule, you do a fine needle biopsy or you take it out and look at the histology. And if it's malignant, you remove the thyroid gland. And if you remove the thyroid gland, a child has to then have thyroid replacement every day till they die, or they will die, because you need your thyroid for proper metabolism, like a diabetic needs insulin. They're being followed. How many children have got cancer? I mean, I've never read anything like this in the history of medicine, ever. And that's the beginning, because I told you it takes 5 years for leukemia to develop and 15 for solid cancers. This is within the first year, which has never been seen before. Yes, they're children, they're very sensitive. They must have had a whopping dose of radioactive iodine, which they inhaled, got into their thyroids, which mutated some regulatory genes in cells, and the cells, instead of by mitosis producing 2 daughter cells, went crazy and produced trillions of cells, and that's a cancer. Unregulated cell growth that we can't stop. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So now here's a very extraordinarily important document produced by the New York Academy of Sciences on Chernobyl. And for the first time, they in fact translated 5,000 articles written in Russian into English. No one had done that before. And the International Atomic Energy Agency and World Health Organization, they just did a few lab studies to work out how many died at Chernobyl, but no one looked at the people. To this time, over 1 million people have died from Chernobyl of heart disease, premature aging in children, people getting cataracts, diabetes, leukemia, cancer, and there are homes full of the most deformed children that we have ever seen in the history of paediatrics, and there are photographs here of these children, like thalidomide babies. Do you remember when women took thalidomide for morning sickness and their babies were born with no arms or no legs? I had a man who drove a bobcat on my land at Byron Bay. He had no arms. He drove his bobcat with his toes, and he ran a radio show station called Big Toes because he was so adaptable. But these are the deformities we're seeing now, because when an embryo in the first 3 months of intrauterine life develops all its organs, and after that in the next 2 trimesters it grows in size. So if you get a bit of plutonium in and it kills the cell that's going to form the left half of the brain, or the right arm, or the septum of the heart, that's called teratogenesis, where you have a normal, genetically, chromosomally normal fetus which is damaged in utero by something that kills the developing cells. That's what plutonium does, and plutonium was released all over Fukushima and Chernobyl. We have never seen anything like this. And no one's talking about it. This is the biggest cover-up in the history of medicine that I have ever seen. Now, this is the first 25 years. 40% of Europe is radioactive, covered with cesium and strontium and plutonium and americium, all sorts of really terrible isotopes, and I'll explain this in a minute. I don't eat European food. I don't know what's radioactive and what's not. You can't taste, smell or see radioactive elements. You don't say, I can taste the strontium-90 in this Hershey's chocolates. Why? Because Hershey's chocolates is 13 miles from 3 Mile Island, and they had a meltdown. They powdered the milk for 10 weeks because it was so full of radioactive iodine, and then it decayed away to nothing. But they've never said how much strontium and cesium and other elements are on the ground where the cows graze to produce the milk for the Hershey's chocolates. And so if you get a breast cancer or another cancer bone cancer or leukemia, it doesn't wear a little flag saying, I was made by some strontium-90 you ate in a Hershey's milk kiss 20 years ago. So cancers do not denote their origin, 1. 2, after you ingest radioactive elements, it takes 5 to 70 years for the cancer to develop, and it does not say where it came from. So the incubation time for cancer is a long time. Radiation is a silent cryptogenic killer. Whereas if I sneeze on you, in 2 days you're sneezing, right? Or measles, mumps, chickenpox, incubation time 3 weeks, but this is long. And the only way we know that radiation causes cancer is we take exposed populations, follow them till they die, do autopsies on them, and compare them to non-exposed populations. And there are literally hundreds or thousands of medical articles about this. This is one of the most important documents I've ever read in the history of medicine, and I've been practicing since, what, 1963? You must all read this. You can download it from the New York Academy of Sciences. It's pretty scary. Yeah, it's just called Chernobyl, Consequences of the Catastrophe for People and the Environment. And the lead author is Alexei Yablokov, who's got prostate cancer now. And the other one of the others have died. Wonderful, noble people. Now, Arnie Gunderson said the release from Fukushima is 2.5 to 3 times worse than Chernobyl. So we're going to multiply 1 million by 2.5 or 3 in the first 25 years in Japan. Japan's much more heavily populated than the area around Chernobyl. So I just can't tell you how devastated I feel about this, and that the Japanese government is not looking after its people. You know, the other thing is that if Building 4, with that spent fuel pool that I was starting to describe, collapses because it's terribly damaged by the earthquake, and if there's another earthquake, it could easily collapse. The Japanese government is saying overtly, if that collapses, they'll have to evacuate Tokyo. Do you know how many people live in Tokyo? 30 million. Where do they evacuate them? How do they get them out before the cloud engulfs Tokyo? If that Building 4 collapses, I'm going to take my family out of Boston with my 3-year-old adorable grandson and 9-year-old granddaughter and take them to Australia. Now why? Because the two air masses do not mix at the equator. So the fallout you get up here, we do not get. Okay? However, they've poured huge amounts of radiation into the Pacific. Terabecquerels. I mean, 10 to the 15 becquerels. A becquerel is a disintegration per second of an atom, a radioactive atom. Amounts we can't even imagine. And what happens is that as the radiation goes into the sea, strontium-90, which lasts 600 years and goes to the bone and causes bone cancer and leukemia, cesium-137, which lasts 600 years, it goes to the muscle and the brain, causes brain cancer, muscle sarcomas and the like, and others. What happens is the solution to pollution by dilution is fallacious when it comes to radiation, because the algae suck up these elements, not knowing it's radioactive, by orders of magnitude, 10 to 100 times. And then the crustaceans eat the algae, and more bioconcentration up the food chain, little fish, big fish. And we, of course, stand at the apex of the food chain, so these elements are concentrated most highly in our bodies in various organs. Cesium goes to muscle and brain, strontium to bone and teeth, where it can cause bone cancer or leukemia. The white blood cells are made in the bone marrow. Plutonium. Why do they fission uranium? To make plutonium. Oh, it's great stuff, because you only need 10 pounds to make yourself a nuclear weapon. And each reactor makes 500 pounds of it a year. So America's very keen to export nuclear power plants all over the world, including to Saudi Arabia. Well, that's a good idea, because every country that has a reactor has a bomb factory. And the half-life of plutonium is 24,400 years, so you have it for the next 250,000 years to make bombs for the rest of time. Oh, it's a really nifty notion. Oh, and we're worried about proliferation of nuclear weapons, aren't we? Well, what about Iran? Oh, There's no evidence, according to your 16 intelligence agencies, that it's building nuclear weapons or intends to. 1. 2. Israel's very upset, but Israel is the third largest nuclear power in the world with up to 400 hydrogen bombs. It has not signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, how dare it? And it will neither confirm nor deny that it has nuclear weapons. Who does it think she is? Right? So, if it's surrounded by countries that don't like it, why shouldn't they have nuclear weapons? Or, if you consider 23,000 hydrogen bombs in the world and Russia and America own 97% of them, why shouldn't any other country, including my own, in Australia, make nuclear weapons? So if you export nuclear power plants all over the world, then you're just opening it up. Then we're going to have a nuclear war and we're going to kill ourselves by nuclear winter, freezing to death in the dark, if we're not vaporised by the nuclear weapons. Oh, it's all a good idea. Oh, and it's very powerful. And I wonder, and I'm diverging now, because I do that, what's the dynamic in these men's brains who are into nuclear power and nuclear weapons? If you look at the language they use, it's very sexual. Missile erectors, soft laydowns, deep penetration. That's the language they use, hard lines and soft lines. Nuclear power in the Department of Energy is called hard power. I kid you not, this is anthropological. And solar power, soft power, flaccid, wind power. You know, so in their reptilian midbrains, some of these guys having a toxic reaction to testosterone, they're out to lunch. In fact, I would say that they are nuclear psychopaths. And in fact, I think for the benefit and public health of all of us in the world, they should be put in jail. And someone said to me the other day, you know how the Germans say, what did you do during the war, Daddy? Did you see the Jews going off in the cattle trucks and being hoarded up in the towns? Were you participating in that, Daddy? Did you know what the smoke was coming out of the chimneys? In some years' time, not too long, our children are going to be saying, what did you do, Mummy and Daddy? Letting all these reactors be built and spread all over the world by the nuclear psychopaths. So these people are, and because, you know, Germany did dreadful things, but this is going to kill people for the rest of time. So the Nuremberg principles apply. And the Nuremberg principles are every person is morally responsible for what their society does. A, and B, these people should be tried according to the Nuremberg principles, I would submit. Because they know what they're doing is evil. And when the first bomb, which was ever blown up, which was called Trinity, after the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And if it didn't work, it's going to be called, the telegram to the president was to read it's a girl. It read it's a boy. So there's been sexism in the reptilian midbrains right from the start. And when Robert Oppenheimer watched that bomb explode, he realised he'd captured the energy of the stars. And he said to himself in the Bhagavad Gita, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. And they knew. They knew. And God help us. They were so fascinated by this power, they couldn't help themselves. They're addicted. Now, if you have a father who's an alcoholic and you really love him, excuse me, I have to blow my nose, not on a tree, but a handkerchief. And if you really love your father and you're sick of finding empty vodka bottles in the umbrella stand, you say, Dad, today I'm taking you to a drying out centre because I love you. Right? That's called tough love. So these people, these addicts, we need to analyse why they're doing it. Why did they build nuclear power plants all over Japan on earthquake faults? Why did they blow those bombs up? Why are there 23,000 H-bombs in the world? Why do Russia and America still target each other with thousands on hair trigger alert? And tonight we could be blown up. I'll do that in a minute. Why? Well, if we don't understand what causes polio, infantile paralysis, we can't cure it. We don't know what causes a lot of cancers. But what is the etiology or cause behind the nuclear addiction and the nuclear psychosis? It's in the brain. It's psychology. It's psychiatry. And unless we are game to look at this and what is the pathology in these men's brains, you know, we've had it. And there's a wonderful book called Star Warriors by, not Jonathan Shell, what's his name, Robert Shear, of the guys that work at Los Alamos designing the weapons. Many of them have Asperger's. They're aged like 20 to 30. They have hypertrophied left brain, so they sort of walk around like this. They have no relationship with any person, including women, except with their computer screens. They're brilliant. They're all funded by the DOE or the DOD, making nuclear weapons to blow up the world, and they drink Coke and eat ice cream all day. Now this is pathological. And I think, and the other thing is, I'm getting right off track now, 1 in 25 people are sociopaths. And they are brilliant, charming, erudite, married, but they have no moral conscience. They lie with impunity. No moral. And you can name them. Rumsfeld, Cheney, although he's got a new heart, I don't think it's going to help. But, and these are the people that rise to the top like cream in universities. I saw them at Harvard, in corporations, in organisations, and the military. And they're the ones, because they've got such a neurotic drive, who control everything. Well, not everything, but I'm being generic now. And they're totally inappropriate, whereas the majority of us who are pretty well adjusted, right? Well, we don't have the power and the drive and the neurosis to get there and take them on. So, are we going to let them blow up the world? And just look at what that map, just look at it. Just look at the evil there. So Fukushima, and there could be another hydrogen explosion there too, that accident will never end. Nuclear accidents never end, because what happens is when the radiation lands on the soil in Turkey and Germany and Scandinavia, it gets recycled back in the food all the time, back in the reindeer, back in the cheeses in Sweden, back in the hogs, the wild boar in Germany that are almost so radioactive they glow in the dark and have to be buried in radioactive waste dumps for the next 600 years. So you see, it keeps going, and these elements keep getting into our bodies. Now let me tell you about the nuclear industry and radiation, because they lie. They only talk about external radiation. External radiation is either X-rays, hands up those who've never been zapped by us. Yeah. Hands up those who have their teeth X-rayed every year. Why do you? Your dentist tells you to. So do you think your dentist is God? Do you know they make a lot of money by X-raying you or radiating you? You do not need your teeth X-rayed every year. In fact, you should never have your teeth X-rayed unless you've got an apical abscess and some real pathology. Do not ever have an unnecessary X-ray. Each dose you receive is cumulative and adds to your risk of getting cancer. There is no radiation that is safe. Do not walk through those X-ray machines at the airports. They're criminal. I don't know who set them up, but I think Cheney did with some of his corporate buddies. They must be banned, and I should be ringing the president of the AMA to get them banned. Fetuses are going through them. Little children are going through, and I mean, it's just obscene. I get a full body pat down. I don't mind which orifices they examine. They can do anything to me, but I'm not going through that X-ray machine. So don't have unnecessary X-rays. And also question a doctor, because doctors are not God. But we act like we're God. And you get a bit scared. Take them on and say why. So I'm going to tell you a joke now. This doctor died and he went to heaven. And he went straight up to the pearly gates, and there's a huge queue, miles long, and he said, "I'm a doctor," to St. Peter. And St. Peter said, "So?" And he said, "Well, doctors don't wait." And he said, "Sorry, sport, you're like everyone else up here, back of the line." So he's standing there for weeks. And suddenly, this doctor walks past in a white coat, stethoscope, and, mirror on his head, walks straight up to St. Peter and through the pearly gates. Well, our colleague got extremely upset. And he walked up to St. Peter and said, look, I'm a doctor. You said I have to wait at the back of the queue. I just saw a doctor walk straight through the pearly gates. He said, sorry, sport, that's not a doctor. That's God. He likes to play doctor sometimes. Now, so external radiation is X-rays that go straight through you, and the minute it goes zap, you're irradiated and your genes can be mutated and you can later get cancer, okay? Now, other external radiation is given off by radioactive elements made in nuclear power plants, and it's the same as X-rays, it's called gamma radiation, and that's all the nuclear industry measures. So if you're immersed in a cloud of gamma radiation, they measure that. Or when the radioactive elements land on the ground, they emit gamma radiation, that's called ground shine. They measure that, but they never ever look at the materials that you eat in your food or are inhaled into your lung. And say you inhale 1/1,000,000th of a gram of plutonium, which is about the most deadly material we know, into your lung. It only affects a few surrounding cells and the rest of the lung gets no radiation. But it's so powerful as a radiation emitter that almost certainly you will get cancer from 1/1,000,000th of a gram of plutonium. So what they do is they average out that dose over the whole lung fields and say it's not a dose at all, it's fine. But on the whole, they don't even attend to internal emitters. It's like me practicing medicine, and what's an example I can say? You know, I deal with the whole of your body, but I never look at your liver. I don't look at liver function tests. I don't see what's happening, and I may not attend to your heart either. It is, what would you call them, Mary?
Deception.
No, it's worse than deception. Much worse. And the thing is, they've got so much money paid for by you through the Department of Energy, who my colleague calls the Department of Evil, that they get on the media all the time and they have the gall to say I'm lying. So I will have to say at this point that I don't believe in freedom of speech when it comes to science. If I lie in medicine, I would be damaging or killing my patients and I would be deregistered. I don't believe that Rush Limbaugh should be on the air talking to millions of ignorant Americans, lying. A, he's scientifically illiterate. B, he's lying about global warming, which is so serious that by 2050 they say it's going to be 3 degrees centigrade hotter, and by the end of the century 6 degrees, and that's antithetical to life. How dare he lie? And what the media is responsible for is educating the people. And as your Jefferson said, that wonderful man, an educated democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. And that's all I do, is teach. As a doctor practicing global preventive medicine, I'm a doctor, I'm not an activist. I'm a doctor trying to prevent disease and death. And so we must not have anyone on radio or television lying about science. And then you have to look at the Congress, almost all of whom are scientifically illiterate, and almost all of whom, if you'll forgive me, are corporate prostitutes. So why don't you have a democracy? Well, I'll tell you, in Australia voting is compulsory. We have to vote or we get fined $50. So we have Down syndrome's voting, everyone, you know, all the way up to IQs of Mensa people. And we feel it's a privilege and we like it. And we're registered because they take our postal address. Our campaigns are 3 weeks long, intense. I ran for Parliament, I nearly won. I was nearly the first independent in the lower house. Nearly won, I missed by 600 votes out of 70,000. And the government paid for all of my expenses afterwards. I didn't owe any money. So, and then I can't believe that many of Americans think they don't have to vote. Well, they should go and live in Yemen. They've got no right to live in a democracy unless they use it, because democracy invokes responsibility. It invokes being well informed and using this democracy you've got, which you do have. We've shown that again and again, all of us in this room. Then when you vote, it's not enough, because then you have to Get to know who your congresspeople and senators are. You have to go and see them every time they come back to the district and make appointments, and take your colleagues, like doctors. Make them read the Chernobyl book. Educate them. Make them read my book, Nuclear Power is Not the Answer. Educate them about what's happening down here and what could happen if there's a meltdown or one of those tanks explodes down in Savannah River. God help us, because they don't know. And if you don't do that, you leave a vacuum into which step the corporations. And so the corporations run your country. And many of them are evil, and I use that term really carefully, because they don't care about you. The bottom line and top line is money. And they will exploit you and do whatever to get rich. And you saw that with the banking crisis and the global financial collapse, and nothing's really changed. So what people don't understand here is that your congresspeople are your representatives and you are their leaders. The president is not your leader. He's your representative. And that means getting out off your bottoms from Facebook, which is kind of addictive and all the rest, and getting out and using the democracy, which is why the Occupy movement has been so astoundingly successful, because they're out there with their bodies, while the people in Wisconsin who took over the state house and Governor Walker's being recalled and stuff, why they've been so successful. We have to get out there and take over our state houses and the Congress, and occupy the Congress and take it over, because who does it belong to? It belongs to you. It's your Congress. It's your Congress. And when I spoke to the Occupy movement in Zuccotti Park, you know, the police were lovely, because they're being exploited too and not making enough money and everything. You have to befriend the cops. Well, if they bash you on the head, you know, I met the old woman the other day, who 82, got pepper sprayed. I said, I'm so sorry. She said, with her eyes blazing, she said, it's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. Because she got catapulted to the top of the media, and everyone talked about her and how brave she was and what the Occupy movement is about. So when I went to Zuccotti Park for the first time for 20 years, I got this incredible feeling of not just hope, but profound joy and exaltation. And there were women in fur coats and men in pinstripe suits, homeless people, dogs, children, the whole thing. It was America in action. We've done it before. We led the movement in the 80s against nuclear weapons. When I came, most people said it's better to be dead than red. I said, you'd rather be blown up in a nuclear war? Yeah, we don't want to be communist. So there again was a mass psychosis. So we formed Physicians for Social Responsibility, and we dropped the bombs and decimated everyone. And at the end of 5 years, 80% of Americans were opposed to nuclear war. And I met with Reagan in the White House for an hour and a quarter, holding his hand, because he was pretty anxious because he didn't know anything. His IQ is about 100, and you know, he had impending Alzheimer's. But you know, but he did then start to say nuclear war must never be fought and can never be won, and it led to the end of the Cold War as he worked with Gorbachev. So we led the Second American Revolution. The Second American Revolution, which was sagacious, peaceful, and Gandhian. Now we've got to have a third one, which will be non-violent. Because if you don't take over your country, the earth is doomed. And you will prevent these reactors being built. You will prevent them. You will lay down in front of the bulldozers. And as Martin Luther King said, if you don't have something worth dying for, you're not really living. I have had 8 death threats, that I know of. Well, what's my life compared to the only life in the universe? It's nothing. I'll be dead soon anyway. I'm 73. I'm not here to be hedonistic. I'm not here for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which you can't pursue. The only way you can become happy is to serve. Serve nature. Serve this beautiful country with the dogwoods coming out. Serve your fellow human beings. Spending a day in a clinic with my dying CF patients, I'm so deeply fulfilled and hungry and exhausted, but happy. Happiness comes from helping others and nature. And I once said to Carl Sagan, who is a close friend of mine, Carl, do you think there's any other life in the universe? And he paused for a long time. And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, because if any creatures or species had reached the stage of development we've reached, we would have destroyed ourselves. But I do know that in everyone's heart and soul is profound goodness with which they were born. That purity of when you deliver a baby is there. And how do I know that? Because when I treat people, patient people whose children are dying, they fall into my arms and weep, or they're dying. And they open up like a rosebud and tell me everything they've done which is bad. But then it's too late. So I know that that purity remains in every heart and soul throughout their lives. And I know that the people doing these evil things know they're evil. And that's why 1/3 of Americans are on antidepressants, because they know they're not doing the right thing. So I know that we can fix it. I just want to end with nuclear weapons and fixing. Well, first of all, I commissioned this study called Carbon-Free, Nuclear-Free by a brilliant physicist called Arjun Makhijani. You have enough wind west of the Mississippi to supply your whole country with 3 times the electricity you currently use. If there were solar panels on every house and solar hot water systems, you would be independent from all these blasted corporations who dominate you, but you're not taking the initiative, see? You've got to. And if you put solar panels on every house and you put windmills out in the west, what would happen to the GDP? And how many thousands or hundreds of thousands would be employed? It's called the Energy New Deal. And you could become the energy superpower of the world. There's the answer, like FDR did it, the New Deal. You waste 28% of the electricity you use. Waste it. Nuclear power only provides 20%. So therefore, turn your lights off, you know. Don't leave things running. Turn your computers off. Do not ever use a clothes dryer again. Hang them out under the nuclear reactor in the sky. Oh, I know it's a bit naughty that Mrs. Brown next door might see your underpants and your brassiers, but that's too bad. We always dry our clothes outside in Australia in the sun, and they smell really nice. And in the winter, hang them up by the furnace, and they increase the humidity. So Japan's functioning without nuclear power, so can you. You don't even need it. I mean, it's just a sort of figment of the imagination of these idiots with diseased reptilian midbrains. And also I would say that the women are wimpy. We don't step up to the plate, except Kitty and these wonderful people here have done so much, and Mary and everyone. But you know, a woman will come up to me after election, give me an idea, I say, that's great. Why don't you run for Congress? And she will literally step back 2 paces and say, who, me? And a similar situation occurs with a man, and he'll stick his chest out and say, yeah. Now, is that a product of testosterone, receptors in the brain, and oxytocin? And I don't know, but we've got to change it. So this is the prescription for survival. You must all download it from IEER.org, and it's stupendous. It is the answer for America. Renewable energy costs $12 billion to build 1 reactor now. They're stealing from your future. They're stealing. How dare they? And they are your tax dollars, and you pay for these blasted things. You pay for the enrichment, the mining, the building the reactor, and then a utility grabs it and sells the electricity to a tune of $1 million a day. No more. Now, nuclear waste going through here, you stop it. What are we going to do with waste? Look, I really don't know. But I think probably dry cask storage is the answer. It's a bit expensive, but you're spending $1 trillion a year on death in the Pentagon and having stupid wars killing 1 million people in Iraq and stuff, half of whom are children. So it's time you use the money, your tax dollars, to fix the nuclear waste situation and close down every reactor in the country tomorrow. Tomorrow. And you can do that. There are people here who've done it. Noble heroes, women, and men joined them. But of course you can do it, because if you've got the power and the love of nature and this beautiful place in which you live, and you really understand what a privilege it was that you were even conceived,
Out of the millions of sperm that night that your father produced, your sperm reached your egg. What a privilege it is that we're even alive. And that invokes enormous responsibility. Eh? And it's exciting. You meet such wonderful people. But don't worry about what other people think. Never seek approval. Doesn't matter. Don't say have a nice day anymore. I don't want to have a nice day anyway. Who are they to tell me to have a nice day? You know, at the shops. Have a nice day. And by the way, do you want a bottle of water? You know? Now I'll end with the last thing. I need you to know that America and Russia have thousands of nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. What does that mean? They're in the silos, they're in the submarines. You've got about 1,500. Russia's got about the same. From launch to land, they take half an hour. Russia picks up the attack and they launch their weapons, because the way you win a nuclear war is not about killing people, it's killing the missiles before they get launched. This is Pentagon language. It's really very explicit. And by the time the launch has been picked up and they radio back to Alice Springs in Australia and then over to, I don't know, Strategic Air Command and to the White House, Obama gets 3 minutes to decide. And so does Putin. It's not enough time, really, is it, to think about it? And what happened in 1995 was Yeltsin, who was a very severe alcoholic, America launched a weather satellite from Norway, which they had told the Kremlin about, but the Kremlin's hopeless and they lost the data, and they picked up this thing going up. And they thought that you had launched a nuclear attack to decapitate Moscow and destroy it. You've got 60 H-bombs targeted on Moscow. They've got 40 on New York. Who are the real terrorists? Every town and city in your country is targeted with at least one hydrogen bomb. Who are the real terrorists? Who are the axis of evil? Who are the rogue nations? Russia and America, and they're friends. Why are they doing it? What is the sick psychology in these men's brains that they must maintain their missiles? That's why I call my book Missile Envy, because when you see the thing go up and two big balls of fire, that's what it is. So what happened was, they picked up this attack, and for the first time ever in the history of the nuclear age, the football was open. Hands up those who know what the football is. If you watch the president walking always just behind him is an officer with a suitcase, and the suitcase contains the codes to start a nuclear war. And when Reagan was shot, they lost the football for 2 days. Remember when Alexander Haig said, "I'm in charge now"? So they opened the football. He had 3 minutes. 3 generals standing over his shoulder saying, "Press that button." This was all recorded, Mr. President. And he didn't. And 10 seconds before that end, that 3 minutes elapsed, the missile veered off course. That's why we're here in this church. That's why we're not radioactive atoms floating around in the stratosphere. Those situations occur several times every year. And right now there are 1,000 people per day hacking into the Pentagon computer systems, including the early warning system. And I've got a grandson aged 16 who hasn't got very well developed frontal lobes, but his hormones are really raging. You wouldn't trust him as far as you could kick him. I love him. But they're very intelligent, these young kids, and they're damn good with computers. So a young boy could get it into his brain that might be rather a hoot to hack into the early warning system and blow up the world, because they don't understand death at that age either. We are in gross danger, and it could happen tonight. And if you listen to the NPR station, sometimes you hear, "Ooh." This is just a test of the emergency broadcasting system. This time you would hear, "We are under nuclear attack. You've got 5 minutes to reach the nearest fallout shelter." Not that it would do you any good, because you would be asphyxiated and or pressure cooked by the heat of the bombs. You're all targeted. You've got at least one bomb, but probably many more targeted here. Hydrogen bombs. One bomb on New York destroys the whole thing, and there are 40. Robert McNamara and I wrote an article about that. And the madness continues, and no one talks about it. It's suicidal. We're all like lemmings marching towards a cliff. And we hospitalise suicidal patients because they're dangerous to themselves and others. We're suicidal. We're mentally sick. And who's that Santorum guy? What's his name? Sanctimonious, and the other one, Romney, and you know, they're all into Christianity, and I don't think, anyway, I won't go into that. And then there's Obama, who does care, but he said, I need you to be behind me, and the Americans haven't done it. And it's the elephant in the sitting room that no one addresses. It's like you've got a patient in the intensive care unit dying of acute septicemia. But we don't really talk about it. And in the morning, the patient's had a total organ collapse, the heart's failed, the liver's failed, the patient dies. But we didn't really discuss it. That's not what we do. We stay up all night with our patients. We're devoted to them. Absolute responsibility. And now the Earth is in the intensive care unit. From global warming, which we can fix, here's the prescription. From nuclear power, which you can fix by closing all these damn things down and diverting money from the Pentagon to dry cask storage, and then you won't have this stuff travelling down your highways, period. So that's what you've got to do. And you can abolish nuclear weapons, because Reagan and Gorbachev almost did over a weekend in Reykjavik. So there's a precedent. And we can get rid of these damn things. And then Israel has to disarm, and France, and Britain, and China, and India, and Pakistan. And then we can have moral certitude and say, we've done it, you want to have nuclear weapons. But if you've got them all, why shouldn't Australia have nuclear weapons, right? And I'm going to end by showing you something. And I need volunteers, you, and you, to come up here. Don't move yet, in a minute. Now you've got 14 Trident submarines, which are nuclear powered, that silently circle the globe all the time under the oceans, and in each Trident submarine are 24 missiles, and on each missile are 8 hydrogen bombs. 8. There are enough weapons in these Tridents to destroy life on Earth. All you need is 1,000 bombs blowing up 100 cities to send a huge cloud of toxic black radioactive smoke that circles the globe, blocks out the sun for up to 10 years, and everything and everyone freezes to death in the dark. Nuclear winter. A commander of a submarine, if he got his 2IC to go along with it, like in the cruel sea, could start a nuclear war. Now I'm going to show you a Trident. Get a visual image of exactly what I've been talking about. So now, yeah.
When you're all done, I'm going to make announcements about your tomorrow
Yeah.
event.
More, come on.
Questions?
Hold them up really high, and I'll just go to the mic.
Before we do the questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Each one of those could vaporise New York. There are only 240 major cities in the Northern Hemisphere. And you've got 14 of these things. No one talks about that either. Docked in Puget Sound in the lovely Seattle. No one talks about that. They're built by General Dynamics in Connecticut. Dodds electorate. See? It's called nuclear madness. And that's what we've got to get rid of. So we can do the whole thing. We can abolish nuclear weapons. Russia's ready, you're not. We can close down all the reactors and I'll help you. We can do dry cask storage, and we can cover every house with solar power, all the parking lots, so you have electric cars powered by solar power. And the answers are all here. Most exciting, prescription for survival. We can save the planet. I wouldn't talk to you if I didn't think we could. But the answer lies in your hearts and souls. And if you don't rise up and every morning get up and look in the mirror and say to yourself, what am I doing? What am I going to do today? And look in your grandchildren's eyes, or your children's eyes, or children yet to be born, and know that you love them and you will do anything to preserve the future for them. Then you'll really be living and serving. Thank you.